What is today, Brian? What does today hold for us?
Today is a very special episode that I'm sure none of the people that I know listen to this show will enjoy as much as I have recording it.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we are going to talk about Critical Role Campaign 1. Are you ready?
Hi, this is Jordan.
And I'm Bryan, and you're listening to The Quality Varies.
I can assure the audience that if you do not enjoy D&D, you should skip the episode. If you enjoy D&D, you should probably still skip the episode, as we're not even talking about that. We are talking about a group that is not ours playing D&D that we watch, and we are going to talk
Listen
about...
to.
Listen to. Yes. Inferior people listen to the show. I watch the show. And
Oof.
we are... and we are going to talk about their
So-called
group.
inferior people listen to it at 3 times the speed as those who watch it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You haven't told me that until now, and I now understand why you are caught up so quickly.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about Critical Role's Campaign 1 D&D 5e. I have waited a long time, and when I was going through and when we had started playing D&D, you were very fanatic about another group that was not D&D. What was that group? Oh, I'm sorry, another group that was not
D&D.
Critical. Yeah,
It
sorry.
was the first D&D podcast I started listening to was Drunks and Dragons, and it was hilarious. I don't think anything less of them, but Critical Role is just so much better in pretty much every way. Drunks and Dragons really got me into D&D. They were who I was listening to when I texted you about starting our D&D group, so we have them to thank for that. But then I just decided to start listening to Critical Role for not really any reason. Then I got hooked because it's fantastic.
I have a couple of questions before we even jump into it, and I know this is just me sabotaging myself of the live show that I'm trying to watch here in an hour. But first, I just want to reiterate, because I don't know if it's come up on the show before, the timing of when neither of us had ever played D&D, and then when I started, and then you, a couple months later, decided to, without knowledge of me having started playing, decided to reach out about the game as well. And...
yeah,
when
that
I
was
texted you,
kind of a stars aligning moment.
I was trying to figure out there are no intermingling circles of friends in between my group here in Tri-Cities, Washington, and southern Utah. And so I was trying to figure out for the life of me how this guy has figured out that I have jumped headfirst into D&D. But that was not what happened at all.
Had no clue. No clue. Like I said, I was listening to this other podcast, and I was like, you know what? I'm jumping in. I want to do it. And then I thought of all the people who I thought might be interested, and you, my brother-in-law, and our friend Steven came to the top of my head. So I texted all you guys, and off we went. I did know that Steven and my brother-in-law had played before. I did not know that you had played before, and so that was just a wild happenstance that you owned all of the books.
Yeah, I still can't claim that was the best financial decision on my end. But it is the one I made. I had gone to rehab, so any semblance of judging other people had started to ebb away by that point. And this game that I had really had these judgments and premonitions about, even though I didn't know anything about the game,
Big time.
somebody asked me, and a couple other people that were also in recovery, and that's how I knew them. Were starting, and none of them had played before. So I went and joined them, had a fantastic time. The table was played a bit differently than how I wanted to do it, because I was obviously, after a single session, a professional. And so
that sounds like you.
Yeah, we leveled up pretty quickly. So I think my level 2 gnome wizard, which is still one of my most favorite characters, and he still comes up every once in a while. He died, and my DM asked me if I wanted to make another character, and I said no. I'm going to go run my own D&D, and I felt really bad. But the next time I see him, I am always adamant to tell him that a DM cannot. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to run a game, but there are certainly way different, ways to run the game, and I just had a much different way that I wanted to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
I got into that. You messaged me. We've been having a great time. The other question that I wanted to ask you was now that you've gotten just immersed in Critical Role, we've been in our group playing for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like the Matt Mercer effect, has had any impact on our games? Without hearing any of my input as the DM, what do you feel like there's been any impact from Critical Role in our games?
I am not gonna claim to know exactly what the Mercer effect is. I think it means that D&D groups tend toward this perfectionist playstyle where everything has to like exactly match what Critical Role does. And based on that definition, I would say absolutely not. I think you as a DM and our group are very good at just having fun and playing the way that we want to play.
My perception of the Mercer effect is the Critical Role is a production that has a high budget for things like maps and tokens, or I'm sorry, not tokens, miniatures for monsters and other things. And everybody, including the DM, is a professional and for most of them, critically acclaimed or nationally awarded voice actor. And so they're all very good and very comfortable with doing quote unquote roleplay. And so it gives this in the game, they're just playing D&D, and so people just think like, oh, our D&D games can look like that. But a lot of people don't really take into account that they're a bunch of people that are professional voice actors that are playing D&D, and so it's just going to be a different natural experience when you have a group like that are playing together. I shouldn't bring this up this early into the show, but obviously Joe, I can't remember how to say his last name, Manganello. I'm sure his
my
games.
Boyfriend. Don't worry about it.
Okay, cool. I'm sure his games.
He doesn't know it yet. He doesn't know it yet. But
I wasn't going to ask. I made that guess. I imagine his games look very different than ours. And from Critical Roles, there's still a lot of people that are, including me, that are very jealous of those that are in Joe Mangonello's game.
Oh boy. Yep.
Mostly I'm just jealous for anybody that can walk into that man cave, D&D cave that he's got going on. That is a magical place. But that was just a curiosity that I had. I do agree that sometimes internally, I still am a perfectionist every once in a while in my mind. And that is combated by my severely mediocre physical abilities to actually achieve what I would like to think I would like to achieve. And so I think that's just part of being, I make a guess that it's just part of being a creator in general. And I have so much more respect for anybody that writes any kind of fiction or any kind of thing like that, as there's just an understanding that I just never had before about when I read somebody else, when I read Brandon Sanderson, I'm like, oh, this is gold. And it looks so easy. Like he just put it on paper. Yeah. And then I look at my stuff. Yeah. Like I just spent 4 hours figuring out the crest for a single clan of dwarves. And I look at that at the end of the 4 hours and I'm like, this is garbage. This is hot garbage.
Man,
I can respect that, but that was a general curiosity I had. I wanted to put you on the spot while we were recording and ask you that. Season 1. I finished season 1 probably back in the summertime, if not earlier. You finished season 1 last month, I imagine.
Yes, I finished up the last episode like right before Christmas, which was kind of funny because they were recording it just before Christmas, like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So that kind of lined up, and it was kind of funny. Yeah, so I finished up the episode like the day before Christmas or something, and then in between Christmas and New Year's, I finished up all of they had like 4 or 5 like wrap-up specials.
Yeah.
Where they just talked about stuff about the campaign, stuff that Matt had never disclosed, stuff that they didn't find, and what if this would have happened, or what if that would have happened, or stuff like that. So, and that was all fascinating to me. I loved all of that too.
I want to, because for me, this is really going to start what I feel like is going to be a discussion that leads into the rest of it. One of your questions that you put on here on the doc was the favorite player. I want to hear yours first.
Yes. Okay. This one. So these questions I have written down, none of my answers are just easy answers. Actually, a couple of them are easy answers. But like my favorite player, meaning the actual human being sitting at the table, not the
Yeah.
in-game character. It's gotta be Travis, but only by a little bit. I think Travis had just a way to like accidentally come up with a good plan so many times, and just he was always the one that was kicking things off and making things happen and moving the story along in just such an entertaining and funny way. He's probably my favorite player, but also for a completely different reason, Talison's playstyle was just amazing. My favorite part of the Talks Machina, the talk show, was hearing Taliesin talk about Percy and the psyche and all of the backstory and all of the motivations that Percy had to do everything. That was I loved that.
Travis, like you said, I mean, Travis really kind of he does his part in help kind of bringing a part of the community to D&D, as he is pretty open about him and Joe Manganiello. Now that you've seen the end of the campaign and you saw the whole, what's that T-shirt that they both had together?
Jocks Machina, man,
Yeah.
I want one so bad.
Yeah, Travis is able to kind of for a certain kind of person. He's able to be that example of, hey, like, there's no problem with you playing D&D. And I think everybody in that group kind of helps their kind of people, the people that relate to them with that same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's certain parts of that I look at Travis and that effect, I relate to that in part ways. I'm just some numpty at McDonald's compared to you as far as fitness, but Travis, it's talked about, hang on. What's up?
Are you taking a call right now?
Yeah, I am. I'm recording a podcast right now.
Wow.
But
Never mind.
I hope you leave this in. I hereby decree that you have to leave this in.
what do you need? How much?
This is
how much
great.
do you need it?
I'm just gonna continue talking for a minute.
Okay, all right.
Fun fact:
If it is an emergency, I will
we've
go down
mentioned
and get that
Joe
for you.
Manganiello a couple of times.
All right.
He is the reason I got into D&D at all. I saw an interview of Joe talking about something he did at the very end of the campaign that we're talking about right now on YouTube, and I was like, wait, what? Joe Manganiello, like, he's got more abs than four people combined. Like, this guy's a Greek god, and he plays Dungeons and Dragons? Isn't that just what 40-year-old virgins play in their mom's basement? But no. Joe Manganiello plays Dungeons and Dragons, and so that actually led me to find the Drunks and Dragons podcast, and ultimately get me to play Dungeons and Dragons. So thank you, Joe Manganiello, and thank you, Jordan, for taking a phone call while we were recording a podcast.
My bad. Anyways, you were talking about Joe Mango. Joe Mango.
You kill me, Jordan.
I don't know what I did wrong.
I did.
I think I said everything correctly.
Yeah, I just told our loving fans about how Joe Manganiello got me into D&D.
That guy is a champion.
Don't worry, he did. Yes, he is.
He's also, as far as a character, he's the biggest dick in the entire campaign as far as characters go.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah. Archon the Cruel.
So my favorite player, you say Travis. Travis is also very close to another. He is second for me, but just by a hair.
Mm-hmm.
Travis's stuff was just beautiful. And the thing that I wanted to mention before I got distracted was, and I've said this to you before, but Travis is like one of the smartest people, one of the smartest players in the group, and in the Critical Role company, he is the CEO of the company.
Right, yeah.
And in the game, Travis just plays Grog so well. Like, it is amazing.
Yeah, like I said, Grog is such an idiot, and Travis has to play an idiotic character, but he found ways to be smart while being dumb.
Yeah.
And it was just beautiful.
I also had to...
So good.
I had to give my hat to Matt for that as well, because Travis explains every once in a while the depth that he put into his backstory, and he didn't want... He talks about this a lot. He didn't want to do the romance in the game. Like, that wasn't his thing. He didn't want... Like, he didn't really want a big backstory. And with the little that Travis gave Matt made something pretty great with Travis's stuff. It wasn't necessarily like the Briarwood arc, but it was pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was That was a really cool time.
Travis was second. Sam is, and for campaign 1, was my favorite player. And it is, I completely admit that it is partly due to, like, I'm just taking the outlook of a DM. And there were so many things about what Sam did the entire campaign that I, as a DM, just so appreciated, in that there's, in every fight and almost every instance, and as far as Sam was so conscious himself, and not really leaving it up to, like, the DM figuring it out or not figuring it out. Sam was so conscious of not metagaming.
Yeah.
And he would always ask, this is a thing that I would like to do. He would ask, would my character be aware of this? Or something along those lines.
Right.
Yeah. And I thought that was just fantastic. And his thing with, so I have to admit, I wasn't paying a whole lot about the dynamic of the group. And in the beginning, I went through a whole spectrum of where I thought Sam was at as far as real life. Not that it mattered, or that it matters. But when I started watching the show, I was like, in my head, it just made sense that Sam was married or was in a relationship with Ashley. Because I was like, there's no way that anybody would talk to anybody else like Sam's character does to Ashley's character. Unless they had a real life romantic relationship. Because it was only a couple episodes into them going into the cave, in campaign 1, that Ashley just walks into this room and Sam just, like, drops his pants and Sam's character. What is Sam's character's name again?
Scanlan.
Scanlan just, like, drops his he just drops his pants. And Ashley, the way that Ashley, I just thought that they were in a relationship. I didn't know anything about Bryan W. Foster at this time. He doesn't really come into the picture with the company until later. So that was the case. I realize I see something, or I think one of my other players corrects me because I'm an idiot, and tells me that he is not in a relationship with Ashley in the slightest. And so I'm like, okay. And then I see the interactions that him and Liam have. And in my head, I don't even know. In my head, I was like, okay, Sam is gay. And I was totally fine with, like, I just accepted that.
With Liam.
Yeah. And I saw some YouTube video that I didn't actually watch. I just saw the title of. And it was when they were starting to reboot their podcast that they have, the two of them.
Yeah.
That originally,
all work and no play.
Yeah, which preceded Critical Role by a good amount, I think. But then they dropped it for a while. But then Critical Role picked it up, and it's part of the company now. So I didn't look at it. I didn't look into it at all. That was my new thing that I just thought. And it wasn't until towards the end of campaign 1 that I figured out that both Liam and Sam and Ashley were both in completely happy and separate relationships that didn't have anything to do with each other.
Yeah. There's one moment on Talks Machina, though, that I want to bring up now that you mentioned that, is Liam does confess that he kissed boys in college, and Sam reacts like shocked, like a scorned lover, and he just, like, gives this face of like, oh, I'm right here, how could you? And it was so funny. The whole crew just busted up laughing. It was a great moment.
That is amazing. I actually don't think I've gone through a lot of the talks for season 1, and that is something that I should go back and do now that I've caught up.
There are some gems. Bryan Foster is a genius.
Bryan Foster might
comedian. Just so hilarious.
As far as one of my favorite people in the company, I mean, Bryan W. Foster is a champion among men. Like, he showed up and he's just like, I'm here now and I am here to stay and I'm going to forever change Critical Role. And if it was sexual before, man, do I have a story for you. That's what he said.
Yeah, oh boy, if you think that's bad, just stick around.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he had to say. Sam's character was in depth. Sam, obviously, this is a little bit late to give that notice, but there are going to be spoilers in this episode. Now that we're
oh yeah.
Yeah. So Sam is
we'll put it in the description.
Yeah. Sam gives me a real, like, vibe of, and this might seem really random, but he gives me a real vibe of addiction recovery. And not in the ways that that you might be thinking. He gives me the vibe of addiction recovery, as in the meetings that I go to, and the ones that I really cherish. He in those meetings, there's a lot of lighthearted laughter and there's a lot of jokes and stuff, but it's that way because we also get into the most serious of things and the deepest of what is going on in our lives. And for me, I have to have both to be able to to be able to move forward, you know. And Sam obviously Sam also made Scanlan literally addicted to a meat spice, but his character also portrayed like he was all jokey and laughter and all that, but he also more than any other player, well, I shouldn't say that, in a unique way, he let it be as serious as he felt it could be. When he yelled at the group and his character left.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that was
intense.
Yeah, and you think like, oh, you know, they wouldn't do that in a D&D, you know, in these D&D groups, you wouldn't do that or whatever. But Sam was invested in the story, and Sam was willing to do that, and that made a moment that was very memorable. And so, in that weird way, I always think about addiction recovery because, you know, he's this character the whole time that was this jokey and laughter person, but Sam as a player was willing to go that other direction as far as it needed to go to push that narrative. And I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It really showed, like the like you said, the depth of Scanlan. That there was more behind all of the dick jokes and the laughs. That there was, in Scanlan's case, a lot of pain and confusion.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really beautiful moment to tell, or a really beautiful story to tell in that moment. And Bryan Foster, whom I suspect heavily of being a brother in addiction, he had a lot of very interesting things to say in the talk shows after that and during that whole story arc, which I agree with. A lot of the things Bryan said was, that is exactly what addiction looks like to a T, and it's amazing that Sam pulled it off because Sam isn't a drug addict, but he was playing this drug addict, and he just freaking knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I do want to clarify. So Bryan, I definitely know he gets more open about it on air as time goes on, but he has been open about it for a while. Bryan is very open about Bryan W. Foster is recovering from heavy drug addictions himself.
Yeah. And
that's one of the reasons why I love Bryan so much as well, because Bryan really, man, if there's ever a real life Scanlan, is it Bryan W. Foster? Bryan,
yeah, some of the stories he tells.
Yeah, some of the stories, but at the same time, Bryan is also very open, and you know, if he wants to get deep, he will get deep about his, and he's got blog posts about it and stuff about his addiction recovery and the things that he dealt with, and so
yeah,
I think that's really cool. Bryan was an inspiration for me as far as, you know, I am open about my recovery, and it's because, you know, you got folks like Bryan W. Foster, and you got folks like that guy in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. What's that actor's name?
Terry Crews.
Terry Crews is very open about his pornography addiction. You got
great guy.
You got the guy that I can't think of any of these actors' names, but the guy that played Iron Man.
Robert Downey Jr.
He's very he's not as open, but he lets it. He's got it out to the public, and he's open to telling a story about his drug addictions and being in jail, and I think so these people, like, that's a very cool thing for them to be, and they're certainly in a more perilous position than I am about them being open about their addictions. I'm just worried about what my roommate's going to think of me, and they got a few more people to worry about than that.
Yeah, they got careers on the line and stuff, for sure.
I think that's cool. For that reason, and just Sam's awareness through the game, Sam had a lot of situations where, and I think all the players have this to a point, but Sam was very conscious of including other players and really role-playing, like questioning or involving or bringing in the other characters in, or the other player characters. Somebody would ask him a question and he would kind of pass it along to the other player, and that awareness as a player was just awesome. And showed how much a player can do to add to the game. When I play in my own games, I can take Sam as a real example of, you know, what I can do as a player to keep the game, you know, fun and interesting. So that is why Sam is my favorite.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I really like Travis too. And I wanted to get to this later, but my favorite moment of the first campaign was when Grog fought that half-orc in the Crucible.
Yeah.
Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Because he fights him twice, right? Am I thinking of the right one?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So it's there's like a gladiatorial pit in this city that they frequent. Grog is he's the big strong guy in the party. So he goes in to try his hand at, beating up the champion in this city. And it's basically just a boxing match. There's no weapons or anything. So it's just punches and kicks. And normally, to a player like myself, if you take away all of my weapons and stuff, I'm like, oh crap, what do I do? But Travis really shone in this fight because he described in vivid, gory detail all of the strikes and the moves that he was trying to do on this other guy, and Matt just played right along with it, and they made this super gritty fight out of it, and Grog loses the first round. He gets knocked out, and they have to drag him off, and he role plays just sulking through the town and just, oh, I just want to go get drunk and forget that ever happened, and he's having a little pity party for a little bit. And then right before they leave town, he goes in for a rematch against this guy. His name was Kern. And same kind of scenario. It's just hand-to-hand, no weapons, no magic, nothing. And very similar progression. There's blows traded back and forth. Grog finally wins. He knocks out this other guy. And man, I tell you what, that moment, I was driving in my work truck. I remember this very clearly. I was driving in my work truck listening to this, and it was somebody who was watching me drive may have thought that I had just heard my favorite football team win the Super Bowl. I was yelling and screaming and clapping, and my eyes were getting teary, just going, just losing my mind at how pumped up I was that Grog beat this guy. And a lot of that was the details that they were throwing in and describing. But man, that was so cool that he lost at first, and then his ego was all bruised, but then he came back and pulled it out. Oh.
Yeah, Travis and Matt and the rest of the group, really, really added to it as well. That was just one example of the whole group just contributing to awesome narrative and a very suspenseful, just satisfying ending for that fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On Matt's end, I think that was a great example of giving the opportunities for the players to have a great moment because he let them fail. I took a big note of that when as a DM, you let the player fail or you let the player die. And that was very significant to me. And there's a bunch of examples out there as far as cool moments that have been brought up because the DM allows that. That was the one that I had watched, and that was the one that I appreciated.
I just remember being so pumped up.
I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, for sure.
And that was
What about you? What was your favorite moment?
The favorite moment in the game was the stuff at the tail end of Keyleth's story arc was pretty dang great. I will say that just I just had so much there wasn't an exact moment to it, but I also just so much appreciated the continuous tie-ins that Taliesin. Sorry, what was his character's name?
Percy. Oh, oh man, give me a sec here.
Percy.
Percival. No, there's 10 different names. Hang on. Percival von Frederickstein Kowalski Derillo III, I believe.
I loved the continuous tie-ins that his arc was having on the campaign, and really that. All of the arcs, besides maybe Scanlan's. Scanlan's didn't really. If I remember, I don't think his had a whole lot to do with the main storyline.
No.
But most of the other ones really kind of had some tie-ins to the main thing, but Percy's just kept coming up and kept
Yeah.
haunting him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it continues on. I don't know how many episodes you've gotten into from into season 2, but they're very open about it. In that there are some things about campaign 1 that that have affected campaign 2, and so that tie-in is just that's just one of those things where Matt has big brain and I have small brain, and I can only look up to him.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so that thing was cool. But again, for the single moment, Laura's character figured it out and hugged the meat man, and it was Scanlan.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's better moments that I'm just not remembering. But man, what a cool because it just had so many elements to it. Because they're in the middle, like their characters have to deal with their characters they're in the middle of something. They have to deal with something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sam all of a sudden had to suddenly manage 2 characters, which the whole stint of him having to manage both of those guys was just great.
So hilarious. Yeah.
But that right there, just like as far as a single moment, that was probably one of the best ones.
Yeah, it was so complex because, like we mentioned, it was such a bitter moment when he left, and there was a lot of anger and lashing out, and very harsh things were said.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of bad blood kind of between Scanlan and the rest of the party. And when he came back, like you said, Vex just gave him a hug, but many others of the group were not very happy to see him, especially in the circumstance that they found him in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that he was hiding, he was hiding from them.
Yeah,
that was one of my favorites. I make a story. I don't want to guess it for you, but I feel like I know what your funniest in character moment was.
Yeah, that's not too much of a stretch. It's the goldfish incident,
yes,
right?
The
Yes.
goldfish incident.
We're basically goldfish. Oh man. Okay, go ahead. Tell it.
If I remember right, they had just gotten done with Pike's, a major part in Pike's arc.
Yeah. Yes.
They had the Pike's family had deceived her. They were just trying to get her money, but they had let her up in this whole big multi-session thing as far as a curse and this whole thing, and they managed that, and they were just having a moment of peace. And Keyleth, about 50% Keyleth and about 50% Marisha, jumped off of the cliff, and I don't know, was it just because she was just feeling so peaceful or something?
I think there was something in the water below.
Oh, they had to go get the.
I want to
say they dropped a diamond, I think.
Oh yeah. There was something to go get at the bottom, and they're like, "Well, how do we do it?" And then Keyleth just runs and says, "Don't worry, guys, we're basically gods." And she just jumps off of this 1,000-foot cliff and just starts falling.
So Matt, the whole group is trying to, not metagaming, because at a certain point, then you've just spent too long talking while the person is falling off of a cliff. But Matt is trying to guide her and lead her with these questions of what would you like to turn into? And she's getting stressed, and everybody else is getting stressed, and she firmly plants her feet and her banner on that of a goldfish. And that is where she is going to fight and die.
Because she's falling into water, right?
Yes, and she talks about it. The conversation never stops about this decision. But she turns into a goldfish, and she immediately turns out of a goldfish, and then immediately dies.
Yeah. Immediately, not just unconscious dies, death dies.
And I'll tell you what, that is just the reason I like that moment so much, because it's my favorate too. The reason I like that so much is because it is the gift that keeps on giving. It only keeps getting funnier the longer it takes. Because the night that it happened, it wasn't necessarily. I mean, it was hilarious, but in a morbid way. But most of the people were just like, what? But for every consecutive week after the event had happened, it was just funnier and funnier.
Yes. Yeah. Oh man, everybody had stuff to say about it. Travis won't drop it. Yeah. Bryan Foster won't drop it. Through the whole thing, Travis is standing up off of his chair. You what? You jumped off a cliff? And he's just like in hysterics, like laughing, trying to catch up to Marisha's logic. You what? And then when Matt says, "All right, you land and you turn into goldfish marinara sauce on top of the water," and just Travis and Sam just die laughing.
Oh.
And I texted you like as it's happening.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I remember texting you at work like, "What is this?" Oh man, and I was just dying. I probably looked insane just walking around somebody's house treating for bugs, just laughing my butt off. Oh man, that's gonna be a running joke for a while, isn't it?
Oh man, that is never gonna stop. I mean, that is gonna join her for forever. And they talk about it all the time as far as her logic and that she was going into water and it was in the moment, and she has the defense of other people that said yes in the moment. I saw no problem with what you were doing, and she still holds on to that. But man, was it awesome. And she talks about how she, good. Like her fate, like her expression, like when Matt told her, like, you died, and she's like, I died.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Like dead?
And there's
like
people
dead,
bring up
dead.
because if I remember right, I think Matt may have gone outside of Raw as far as the damage she took, because there's a cap on falling damage, and I don't think he used it. But for all the better. I mean, that is yeah. I mean, I have nothing but happiness that he didn't use that, because that just made the moment so much better.
Yeah. What did he say? He said something like, "Hang on, guys, I don't have enough dice for this."
Yeah.
And the table was like, "What?" Oh man, just every consecutive reaction and just the next progression of that whole incident was it just kept getting funnier and funnier. Man. Oh man.
So that is easily and by far the one, just because it gets better and better every time that it comes up in the conversation.
Yep, every time you think about it.
So this one is a bit different. The funniest player reaction. I'll start with this one. Oh man, Liam, I swear, has still not let it go. But when Vax walks out of the room after talking to Taliesin, and in the moment that Laura just on a dime just puts herself in that bathtub, and she just breaks the water, and she's like, "Oh, I didn't think you would ever leave." That was the best. In the moment, that is another gift that keeps on giving, because in the moment, that was one of the hardest. The players have never laughed harder. That was it was so good, and then Liam just held on to that resentment of her being able to just make up that she was in the bathtub, and you will hear his. I mean, you heard his snide comments, I'm sure, for the rest of campaign 1. You're gonna hear it for a good portion of campaign 2. And he says, somebody will ask him, and he says, "Well, it's a game of make believe, and if Vex can put herself in that bathtub, I can. I don't see why I can't just make this up." And he jokes about it, but there is definitely just some deep seated stuff because of that.
Yeah. It's just for context for anybody who didn't know what we were talking about. Laura and Talisin's character were in a relationship. Laura and Liam's character are twins, and Liam went to Taliesin in the bath for some reason to have a man-to-man talk about, okay, you're dating my sister now, and we had beef in the past, but now we're cool because I want you to be with my sister. And then he gets up and walks out, and then Laura's character pops up out of the bath because she had made up that they were bathing together, and it was so funny. It was such a good moment.
Oh. It was, oh man, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
So that is my favorite one. That's all I have to say on the matter. It was just it is, every time Liam brings it up, you can just tell that Liam is just smiling and grimacing at the same time, and I love it.
Yeah.
What about you?
My favorite was the reverse math moment I can't remember what happened, but Travis rolled too many dice for damage or something, so he had to take some of it away, and he gets flustered, and he's like, "Oh, okay, hold on, I can't do reverse math." And
Yes.
Sam looks at Travis like equal parts shocked and disgusted. Like, "Are you serious?" And he says, "You mean subtraction?" Just the look on Sam's face. That's one that I went back and watched on YouTube because it was so ridiculous. He was like, you could see in Sam's soul like the deep regret for ever having known Travis in that moment. Like, what did you just say?
I completely forgot about that. That is...
Yeah.
I'm writing these down, by the way, to go back and rewatch them.
Yeah, that was a gem. And Bryan had some very good stuff to say about the reverse math moment also in talks.
I mean, what? I mean, just what a... Those are the moments that Sam shined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was just able to grasp something and just take it all the way.
Yeah.
And just in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
But no.
Yeah, just turn the dial up all the way
Yeah.
up. Yeah. Sam was great at that.
Yeah, I mean, that is up there. That is one of the best. The favorite battle. I make a story that I also know, well, about 70% sure that I know which one is your favorite.
What do you think it is?
I think that you really liked and I think you were blown away by the fights at the end. But I think that you are going down the path of Grog's father.
His uncle?
I thought it was his father that he killed.
The Kev deck? Yeah. The Kev deck fights? I'm pretty sure that was his uncle. And that is close.
Oh yeah, because his father's already dead.
Right. And you're right. Both of those were amazing. But honestly, my favorite fight was Grog versus Kern. That rematch of Grog versus Kern. It was just so like gritty. Or actually, you know what? I really liked Grog when he went and fought that Earthbreaker Groon.
Yeah.
In the temple, and he fights him twice. The first one, he gets to have 2 party members to back him up, but the second time it's just man on man again, and that was a really cool fight because Grog had all of his stuff, he had all of his weapons and stuff, and he got to show a lot more Travis got to show a lot more creativity in that one-on-one fight, and that was a really epic, cool fight to hear. Again, Travis and Matt just go back and forth and beat each other up.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of those though that we talked about were just fantastic.
Man, there are some of these that I'm just already ready for you to be caught up with Campaign 2, because I already want to ask you these questions for Campaign 2.
Yeah.
I'm excited,
Yeah.
but that fight was great. Travis does a really good job of going along with Matt when Matt is obviously, because with Earthbreaker Groon, he is obviously still telling a narrative when Earthbreaker Groon is like demanding, I think he keeps saying like, where does your strength come from, or something along those lines. And a player could easily find themselves just like, it's not easy, or when the DM starts pressuring them, like they can just like, oh no, this is dumb, and they just get frustrated. And Travis just committed himself, like he just kept going along with Matt, and he's like, I don't know where this is going. I am doing my best to figure it out, and I am going to continue to try to figure it out. And it's so like he just committed himself. He's like, all right, like I will keep going, and that was just he allowed it to be a really cool interaction.
Yeah, and that's a lot of why I liked it too, was because there was like the heavy combat scenes, but also there was that narrative going through, like, what is Grog thinking, and where does Grog think he gets his power from, and that whole thing, and like Grog's so dumb, but he does have this like code of honor that he lives by, and like, what is Grog thinking during getting his butt kicked, and he pulls it out at the end, and I loved his answer at the end, and it was just a really, really cool, satisfying scene.
It was It was amazing, and that was one of the biggest parts of what I'm talking when I mentioned Travis didn't have a big backstory, and I want to touch base on that with Scanlan again as well. But with Travis not having a big backstory, I mean, Matt took it and he used it. And Travis being willing to go along with what Matt had, I mean, that allowed, this awesome narrative as far as, he gets his strength from his friends. And, that was the story that he got to tell.
Yeah.
And he was willing with that. The thing that I thought, and we were talking about the depth of Sam's character, and almost the funniest part I find about that is because there was not depth to his character when he began. He was the one that there were a couple of them that hadn't played before, but Sam really was the one that Liam was his friend. The first game that they played was for Liam. Sam was just doing it because he just was cool to do whatever. And he just made the dumbest character that he could, and that was what he did.
The typical horny bard,
the least useful race, and the typical horny bard. And of course, I think gnomes are awesome, but that was what people told him.
Right.
And the depth that came out of that, and this, Sam certainly did his job to make sure the stereotype of the horny bard stayed, if not single-handedly, perpetuated it or created it. I just think that just speaks to his own personality. So.
And Matt touched on this in some of the wrap-up talks that they had. Like you said, a gnome bard is kind of laughed at as being this joke class that's not really useful. They don't do a lot of good things, but there were countless moments throughout the whole campaign where Scanlan was the clutch character. There were so many times where they almost died. Everything could have fallen apart, but then Scanlan comes in and in one turn flips everything around and saves the whole day. And it was there's just so many awesome moments.
Have I already, because this applies, for me it is a Sam moment, but the best / most impactful moment, have we already gone over that?
We talked about mine. I don't know.
So mine, if I said something else earlier, because I've already forgotten it, forget that. The most impactful moment for me was when Scanlan was frustrated that he had to use a 9th level counterspell because he had prepared it for the wish spell.
Yep.
And that is the one that I still what a moment of one single spell or one single choice that had so much of an effect, or if he had done this, or if it had worked out just a bit differently, so where he didn't have to use the 9th level spell. Things would have been completely different. Yeah,
so many things could have been different.
And just the...
Yeah, I forgot about that, but that was a big one.
And maybe this isn't even necessarily the most impactful moment, because it's the other way around, where it's memorable because it didn't happen. But maybe the best player reaction for me actually is this one, because every other player just stops when they realize nobody else had thought about it. Sam had just was trying to manage this part of it himself, because he was the only one that could. He was the only person that had access to do something like this.
And he had made that copy of himself, so that he would have extra spell slots as a backup for this exact moment.
He had prepared it. He had written it out. He had if I remember right, I think he had written out what he was going to say, because the wish spell is so finicky.
Yeah. Well, he had a few different ideas.
Oh, got it.
Written down. If I remember right. And
Matt's facial expression, as it goes through this roller, because Matt is going to teleport the enemy away, the big boss, the god.
Yeah.
He says, "I am going to counterspell that." And I think Matt says, you can't, you're super far away. So he says, "I can, because my duplicate is up on this hand, and that's why I'm up on this hand, so I can do this counter spell." And that was a moment in itself. Yeah. And then
I specifically moved up to this exact spot so I could do this. That's right.
And he's like, "Okay, what level are you doing it at?" And Sam is out of spells, and Matt has this other face of he knows that he doesn't have anything, and he says, "I'm doing it at the 9th level," and Matt's face for that just was priceless.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, well, it succeeds.
Yeah, it
And
has
then
to. Yeah.
Matt is trying to.
So there's like the elation from the table, like, yes, we stopped him. Yes, we've got him right where
Yeah.
we want him. And then
Matt's trying to piece it together, is what I gather from his face. Like, why are you doing this? Why did you just use your 9th level slot to do this? And then it all comes. I mean, he used his 9th level slot because he had to, and it all comes together really how much. And it's impactful because it immediately showed how much time Sam had put into it, the player, and how much he had thought about it. Because like it's like when you get a gift. Like, you can get a gift that's just a gift card to a store, and that's cool. But the ones that are more impactful are even if it doesn't cost any money, it's when somebody spent time, even if it's just a kid like drawing a picture, like sent some time to like, what is your interest, and they spent time thinking about it, and they put energy into thinking about you. And as soon as Sam said this was going to be for the wish bell, all of a sudden all these layers started to come together of everything he had done.
Yeah.
Everything he had prepared.
Yeah. Doesn't he get teary-eyed? I want to say he like starts to like choke up and get like sad and like starts to cry. Like, this was one of the.
Liam. This is one of the only times that he does get emotional. And the whole Matt and every other player in the room can see suddenly the time and the energy that Sam the player had committed to figuring this out for Liam and for Vax. And I mean, because of the character relationships at the table, almost everybody else as well. Since he had a twin and he had a relationship with Marisha's character Keela. That was the most impactful.
Yeah. I also want to redact my best
you've already given me such a good one.
I know. This one's not funny. This is the best
reaction,
player reaction. Yes, which is not written down, so it still counts.
Counts.
When Scanlan dies and they have to do the ritual to bring him back. I forget what fight he died in. Oh, it was one of the dragon fights.
It might have
right?
been. I don't have a good memory on how he died.
I can't remember. They were great fights. But they fought this big, ancient, huge, horrible dragon. And Scanlan dies. And so the rules in their game were they had to do a ritual where 3 people would contribute something, and there was a dice roll check involved to see if it was successful or helpful or whatever. And when Travis's character Grog finds Scanlan dead, Scanlan and Grog are like best buddies. So Grog picks Scanlan up, and Travis just starts yelling, "Fix him! Fix him!" Because
I do
remember that. And like Travis is getting choked up, and everybody else is getting choked up because the big guy's getting choked up. And then they end the episode right there, and then they pick up the next episode for the revival ritual. Out of game, Travis Willingham is a diehard Dallas, Texas fan, football fan, and their rivals are the Washington. Used to be the Washington Redskins. Now they're the biggest joke in the NFL. The Washington football team they're like rules, and Sam became a Washington fan because just to mess with Travis. And anyway, just some backstory. For the ritual, Travis wrote a poem for Scanlan with like rhymes and everything, and he sang it sobbing through the tune of the Washington Redskins fight song. And that was so amazing. Like, the acting involved, and again, like you said, the thought and the energy involved in like putting that much emotion into something for one of your friends was just so touching. I can't believe I forgot about this moment, but I was driving. I had a long commute to work that day, thank goodness, because I remember like actually getting teary-eyed when Travis was singing his rival's fight song for his buddy. That is such a huge deal, and like I don't think I would ever sing a rival football team's fight song for anything. But he did for his buddy, and that was easily the most touching character interaction for me.
Yeah, that is, and like you said, for similar reasons as far as like the commitment to the other character.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that is, I mean, I can like I agree. Like that is one of the biggest moments for the same reason that Sam's thing is one of the biggest moments. I think those are huge.
Yeah, man, that was something else.
Is there anything else about the campaign that you want to make sure you get a word in?
Yeah. So I, like you, had a lot of judgments towards people who played D&D. And like we've talked about in this episode, people like Travis Willingham and Joe Manganiello really showed me that you can be really athletic and also play D&D and have neither of those things affect who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And that was a really cool thing to see people like Liam, who's very, very much the theater nerd through high school and college, and Travis, who is very much the football jock all through high school and football, come together and be such good friends and share so much love and friendship with each other through this game. That was really cool to see throughout the whole campaign. And it was just such a cool journey to listen to, and they're fantastic voice actors. A lot of them have been in some of my favorite video games and TV shows, movies, like for years back that I didn't even realize. And so that was cool to get to know the voice actors behind some of my favorite things a little bit better through Critical Role. So yeah.
I saw the same thing, and I was seeing a bunch of different people from hugely different. I mean, they were all voice actors, but somebody looking in from the outside, very different people. You look at Taliesin, and you look at Travis, and you look at Laura.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like just way different. But at the same time, in this aspect, way similar. That's always just a cool reminder. And even now, Taliesin just keeps getting better and better. Talison's just a cool guy.
I love Taliesin. Like I just listened to one of the Talks episodes of Campaign 2 where it was just Bryan W. Foster and Taliesin Jaffe, and hands down my favorite Talks Machina episode. Just those two going back and forth and getting weird and dark and hilarious. Yeah. Oh man, I loved it.
I don't even feel this needs mentioning, but I'll do it anyways. In that, you get on the Reddit and you get on the Twitter sometimes, and you just see some negative stuff, and there was some unacceptable stuff, with like when the Last of Us 2 came out, and the voice actors for that. But it's I also find it cool in that it's very hard to maintain. It's like when a kid all of a sudden becomes famous and rich. That same kid almost always becomes an alcoholic or something. It's too much to handle, Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing when you got a company that went from they were doing the best that they could to just get. They had the counter. I don't know how much of the videos of the beginning of Campaign 1 that you watched, but there used to be a subscriber count at the bottom left of the screen, and it was like, all right, guys, let's get like 500 subscribers. Let's get like 1,000 subscribers. And I think it was a little bit more because they were already running off of the Geek and Sundry platform, so they already had like a little bit,
right?
But it was multiplicative. Like they were looking for 5,000, and then they were looking for 15, and then they were looking for 50, and then the counter goes away. And
and now they're at a point where it's like, where, like it or hate it, the Mercer effect is real, whether it's at your table or like globally. Critical Role has affected Dungeons and Dragons massively, both in its widespread popularity and the content that gets released. I mean, Matt has published how many books now?
Yeah, Matt's done at least
in conjunction.
Matt's done at least 2. So the first book by Matt. The first campaign book by Matt, I don't know if it was officially endorsed by. I don't think it was officially endorsed by Wizards of the Coast, but it was equally as quality was just as good. And then his second one was, and it's amazing. And he does other great work. His homebrew items are on D&D Beyond, and it's just stupid to look at the.
The depth of everything that they do, and not just Matt, but like all of the characters, like in other D&D related things. There's essences of Critical Role and influences of Critical Role like all over Dungeons and Dragons, and it speaks to what you were saying about like they started out as another group of friends playing D&D with each other, and now they have a major say in Dungeons and Dragons, like globally.
And I think there's another wave coming because the animated show.
Yeah, and stuff like that. Like what?
Yeah, that was.
They've got comic books. They've got an Amazon original animated series coming out.
Well, not really. I mean,
What?
if there was anything that was going to speak truer as far as like the support and the audience that Critical Role had, it was that before Amazon even picked it up, their Kickstarter was the most successful Kickstarter. I can't remember if it was just in its category or period, but it way exceeded everybody's. And then after the Kickstarter, then Amazon comes in and picks them up, and so they're gonna have an animated show, and
at least 2 seasons.
At least 2
right?
seasons, yeah.
Wow.
And I think the timing is going to work out where around the time that first season is going to come out, if not during, a little bit after, campaign 2 will be wrapping up, and a whole nother campaign will be starting. Because Travis, the CEO, and one of the players, he has said in an announcement, because, things get old. If any TV show were to run as long as Critical Role has, besides some of those, besides some like anime stuff that I know still run, but most TV shows die out by this time.
Oh yeah, burnout is real.
And they're aware of that, but Travis has already said, we have this campaign and we have at least one more in us after this. Which is insane. So you think this one's probably gonna be this one's probably gonna be at least another year. I just make a guess. And then they have a whole nother campaign, which is going to be another 2-3 years, and the anime is going to be the first season of the anime is going to come out right before that, and so I think the timing of it, there's going to be a whole just next wave of exposure. But the thing that I was getting at was Critical Role. They're not perfect, but they've done about the best that they could with keeping chill with how quick they got big.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, there's always going to be some ego involved with fame of that scale. We're not talking about Hollywood levels of fame, but within their sphere, they're beyond Hollywood famous. And so there's definitely going to be some ego there. But I agree that they've remained very centered and grounded to themselves, even amidst this meteoric rise to relative stardom.
Absolutely. And I won't give anything away about the game, but out of the game, it was when Ashley, so partway into campaign 2, Ashley is done with Blind Spot.
Oh, finally.
And she is back, and she's in it, and she's committed. Like it's just a great moment in game, not related to any spoilers or anything, but Ashley's back and she's here to stay. But a couple weeks later, I don't know what the time was in between, a couple weeks or a couple months. Ashley is the president of their nonprofit that they now do.
Oh wow, I didn't know they had one.
Yeah, they didn't. It wasn't too long ago that they started it up, but yeah, basically they choose. It's not like they have one committed thing they do all the time. Like their nonprofit is like you can give to them, and with the confidence that they vet all the things that they look at and that they give to. So they have a couple of partnered people that they know that are good and will use their money well. And they have a couple, they'll focus on like one project a quarter or one project every couple of weeks. That's where their focus is. And so it could have gone, you see a lot of actors and just a couple that I named a while ago and a lot more that, you can just think about pretty much any child actor.
Yes.
It can just go horrifying. It can just be terrible.
Oh yeah, very bad. Yeah.
If there was ever going to be an example of something getting too big too fast, it would be Critical Role. And so it's not that they did anything like spectacularly good. Just the fact that they haven't just gone off the deep end at the bad end of the spectrum just is a very good sign.
Yeah.
So that's just my comment on that.
touched on it before, but I think that speaks greatly to their all of their friendships. And they've mentioned before that their friendship within themselves has always been more important than the show. Has always been more important than the game. And from before day one, they had all made a pact that if this got in the way of their friendships, they were like it was done.
Yeah.
And so that's been a really cool. Just knowing that has been really cool that they've had that intention going into it, and seemingly throughout.
Well, and like you said, like Matt gets emotional whenever he talks about it. But when he's talking to Felicia Day, and I mean, so credit has to be given to Felicia Day as she was the
Big time.
Felicia. So for anybody, she has a very active Twitch channel. Just in that she's on it a lot and she plays. If you ever want to catch that, but Felicia is just addicted to creating stuff. Felicia has several books out. Felicia's a fantastic actor and very popular, and she created Geek and Sundry, and she was the one that approached Matt about Critical Role, and so I mean there has to be she left Geek and Sundry when her role no longer became about creation and it was just about managing a company, and it was no longer any fun. And so she has to take a lot of credit for that, and her seeing what was going on and what Matt and the group had started, and seeing that something could be there. But Matt gets very emotional when he says how like he was just so happy, and so like it was such a fun group of people, and it was such a fun group of friends that had come together that things would change if the game wasn't happening. And he didn't want that to end. And not to the extent that I don't want to relate a lot of the things that I do to the extent that he's taken them, but I can definitely relate to that to some part where I'm just, the connections that I have because of the D&D groups just wouldn't be the same if the D&D groups weren't there. And
Absolutely.
so, very, I can feel the same way where if something were to change or, something were to come up, I just don't, I think we have these great connections, people are hanging out with each other, and I mean, surely it would fall apart if the D&D game wasn't happening. Or people that you have people that you just like connecting with, and D&D is just the reason that you get to connect.
Yeah, it's the D&D is kind of the chicken nugget for the buffalo sauce.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, but
chicken nuggets are a delivery method for buffalo sauce.
Okay.
That's the only reason I eat chicken nuggets is so I can have buffalo sauce.
I don't think I've ever had buffalo sauce. And I've worked at McDonald's.
First of all, wow.
Oh wait, no.
McDonald's?
I put buffalo sauce on my McChickens.
Yes. That's the only way McChickens are edible. Sorry. I know McDonald's is huge. I hate McDonald's.
McDonald's serves a purpose. When once a month, when I want to feel like a crappy person, I go there.
When you want to feel
sometimes you just want to be like, oh man, I just want to eat the worst food, and in about 2.5 hours, I just want to feel like garbage. So.
Yeah, well, that usually for me, that's eating the garbage food is in response to already feeling like a garbage person. I guess that's just me.
There are some days where I'm just like, today I'm ready. I'm ready to knock myself down a few pegs. Let's go to McDonald's. I think we'll wrap it up there. Surely campaign 1 is going to be gone over more in the future, and certainly when we start getting into campaign 2, it will be impossible not to bring up.
There will be references.
Yes, there will be references, and it will be impossible not to bring up the first campaign.
It's just so good. Can't not bring it up.
Yeah, it's a fantastic thing. So I feel like that was a pretty exhaustive conversation. I'm pretty happy with that. Sunday afternoon is going to be a great day. Getting to edit this, I'm really excited.